Top of the morning, folks. Chris Rockwell here. Saturday, I think it's 4 a.m. And man, I woke up. I've been a little under the weather the last few days, and haven't had much to say. There's been a lot of tragedy in a short period of time, again, and watching Los Angeles burn to the ground and watching all the tragedy and the loss of so much. It takes me back to the fires in Northern California that were very tragic in my hometown and surrounding towns. And it didn't happen one time. It happened multiple times. And I personally, I was evacuated multiple times with fires, like many people I know personally, my friends and family. Many of us were evacuated not knowing if our houses were going to be standing when we came back. And for some of my friends, that's the case. I just, it's traumatic, man, to go through that experience of actually being in a fire like that and being evacuated and trying to get away, like to survive, and driving through, in the dark, through just falling ash coming down so bad with fires on both sides, just lapping up the sides, heading towards the road, towards us. It was being stuck behind cars and everybody's backed up, and cops and fire departments, everybody's trying to do the best they can and evacuate people and help. And, I'm watching the fallout in Los Angeles, with the whole politician thing and the political cause and effect, and this is nothing new, you guys. I was going through this up in Northern California with all of us up in NorCal for the last 10 years. And I want to, instead of just talking like I keep hearing most politicians in particular doing right now, which is what most people do in families to start with. What I'm going to touch on is, it's like a macrocosm. These giant fires and then the fallout of it. It's like a giant, symbol of a macrocosm of a family unit, where the good people are out doing their thing, working their butts off, not trying to bother people, but the dysfunctional people in the family, as in our society with the leaders we choose. Not all of us chose leadership in power right now in California, but I can tell you this: you want to hear my personal experience about Gavin Newsom, and I'll tell you about the leadership. And this is the kind of person in a family that looks great, sounds great, but is more obsessed with their image to the world of being a good guy than actually worried about the family. I know a little something about that too. But it's a societal sickness of behaving poorly for societal benefit, gaslighting the good people. Bad people gaslight the good people. That's just kind of the way it goes. Gaslighting is projecting crap onto good people. And what I've witnessed with using Gavin Newsom as kind of this lightning rod example and point, he is that person in the family that is the slick talking, good looking guy who gets all the praise outside, but he will do anything to get what he needs to be on top. And he'll blame anybody and everybody, and he'll destroy a lot along the way. And, when we had those giant fires in NorCal, in my hometown, multiple times, that were so destructive. Everybody, focuses on one big fire up there because Hollywood did a big documentary on it just by happenstance in a town called Paradise, because it all, lines up because it accidentally happened. But what people don't know about, my little hometown, which was right next door, we got multiple fires that were just about as devastating on a larger scale of square mileage. And I observed something that I think is really important, and it's timely for this situation in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles fire, and how Gavin Newsom has blamed the good people and is looking for backup to continue gaslighting the good people, the responsible firefighters, the ones who, have been pushed out over time to have some of the most a highly corrupt organization that have budgets that are just staggering. So I have, when that's all happening and we have more fires than ever, and I'm not a big greenhouse guy. I've spent a lot of time deeply in that world of carbon release and developing a software, very, very intricate software for repurposing trees that are being wasted, which there are more than I could even explain to you guys just in the United States. Going back to actually being responsible instead of just blaming, so our society, starting with our families, can have some chance of consistent trajectory upwards in a healthy way. Los Angeles, the fires in Los Angeles and the fallout of it all, it's a reflection of our society in every way, and the state of our families. There's so much instant divide when something goes wrong. The fingers come out and start pointing. And when we had the fires in my hometown, Gavin Newsom took the opportunity to come up, throw on a good old boy jacket, because we were in a fairly conservative county that actually did not vote for him. And he came up to our town with a big giant photo op team behind him. And he proceeded to scold us about us not being responsible, and taking the opportunity after all these people had just died. And I mean, just absolute destruction, man. This guy comes up and he starts blaming us, talking to us how we're being irresponsible because of we're not appreciating and respecting global warming. The tone deafness of that is staggering. We couldn't believe it. We thought it almost seemed like it was like a Will Ferrell comedy. You know what I mean? It was not even real. So when I saw the Zoom call between this morning from yesterday, I saw the Zoom call between Gavin Newsom, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and President Joe Biden. I noticed that Kamala was in the office too at the time. He spent the whole time asking for help, for the president's help, to change the, stop disinformation. He was asking him for help with propaganda, man, to gaslight, to blame, and to not take any responsibility for the decades of just terrible mismanagement in our forests in California. And the insurance companies, you guys know you're in cahoots with Newsom. I just did a video about this, I think 3 days before the Los Angeles fire, specifically about insurance in California fires. So check that out. I was highlighting the Allstate CEO, who I'm sure is totally surprised that the fire happened in Los Angeles. And, you know, this is a much bigger dysfunction that I'm referring to. And it really does start back in the home because, you know, I think, you know, what I've witnessed in and out of my own home is that it's very easy to be convinced a very different reality by the people in charge. And a lot of times, if there's selfishness involved, even if it's lying underneath and everything else above looks like Mr. and Mrs., you know, Cleaver, that's always a little bit suspect to me. So, you know, Gavin Newsom looks good, but what he has proven to someone like me is, and I go way back with Gavin Newsom. Like, I go back decades with this guy. I'll tell you another story about Gavin Newsom that's just as disturbing. You know, when I was running my record label, and I was spending a lot of time in the visual art world and just that part of the creative world. You know, I would spend a lot of time out in the streets at night. You know, I'd be in recording studios working with artists. It's sometimes late into the night in like Oakland, San Francisco. A lot of times in Oakland though, and Los Angeles. But, you know, in San Francisco, I have a friend who is a world-renowned spray paint artist. His name's Chor Boogie. And back, I don't know what year it was, but I'm going to say it was around 2008 or 9. And Chor was doing a piece. It was totally approved. The city of San Francisco had actually, like they were all good. He wasn't just some like graffiti artist, you know, running from the cops. He had done plenty of that, but I just mean like at this moment when he was doing this really cool piece, it was all legit. Anyway, he had a bunch of he had a guy someone was filming, and he was being filmed doing this piece, and thugs came up, stabbed him, took the camera gear, and bounced, and he almost died, you know. And just trying to do some peaceful art that was good vibes, you know, like it was positive added value to the city that was definitely in decline at the time. They were so full of arrogance, you know, of what I'm watching right now with Newsom right now. But back then, he was a young guy, and you know, he was a fast track coming up fast, and everybody loved Gavin Newsom in San Francisco. And I'd been at some charity events with him, and I've been close to this guy, and I've been around a lot of guys like him, and people very close to me. So, you know, slick, good looking, nice, you know, nice speaking voice, and seems to be empathic. But kind of like Teflon, you know, like not willing to show the true inside of like the ugly stuff, you know, just normal human stuff. That guy showed up. Gavin Newsom showed up at this stabbing in his city, and he proceeded to take the time to have a giant photo op. Like, there were news cameras. They came rolling in. They had it all staged up, and he wanted to take that opportunity to connect with Chor, and it was an awesome photo op. It was like he was saving San Francisco or something, you know? And it was the total opposite. Like, he was the guy who was, you know, like passing all of this regulation that created all this homelessness and just absolute crazy amount of violence and theft and just absolute chaos. That was happening when I was down there working in Silicon Valley too. So another time, you know, it's unbelievable. And all of those people who were in high tech and making, big money, and everybody was on the far left, and it was a big virtue signaling thing. It had less to do with politics, and it had to do with the virtue signaling of, no, I love everybody. I love everybody. Our companies require slave labor in another country, but we love everybody. Get it? So, yeah, Newsom's one of those guys. And I worked with tons of those people. And I actually was good at it because I came from a situation like that. And, so much good stuff also, but I was very capable in that world for reasons. And the things that are very disturbing in a personality profile like Gavin Newsom, he's more typical than he is not. He's very typical, especially in any place where, starting in a family where selfishness, narcissism, greed, power, because the person doesn't feel powerful, is obsessed in attaining that at all costs. And the damage that does to a family, to siblings, to all of the family dynamics, that's playing out in real time in our society. They're not separated. They're all the same. It's the same dysfunction leading, the mainstream narrative most of the time, which is, it's not solution driven. In reality, it's propagandized strategy to achieve goals that are typically not in the best interest of the family or the group, organization, or the community, or a city, or a state, or a nation. So I think, I've had to learn some hard knocks, and I was always I've always been a pretty open, transparent kind of kid and person. I plenty of character defects that I actually am aware of and can own now, because I've done a lot of work on getting sober and inside of recovery, not just putting the drink down, but like actually working on this thing. There's no such thing as someone who has been addicted to this society like I have, like pretty much everybody I know, and we fall into these roles and we convince ourselves that we can, we deserve a break today, or it's Miller time, all the time. It's like, no, it's not. There's always a lot of work to do the right thing, and it's hard to do the right thing all the time. I don't have a perfect record, but what I can look back on my life, and especially because of getting sober, this week I'll have 8 years, if God willing, if I don't drink, in the next few days. And I say that just out of humility. I don't plan on that at all. I feel really good, actually. And I feel very grateful that I am sober, because it ain't easy, man. It's not easy. And it's not easy living a good life and doing the right things. But the one thing that I learned in sobriety in relation to what I'm talking about is that I had to own the ugliest, darkest mistakes that I made. I didn't have the opportunity anymore, just like I watch a lot of people, starting with what I came from and all the way to the big cities of high tech and media, with all these people like Gavin Newsom, that I had to really get honest with myself and own, what are my intentions, Am I just going to keep trying to, succeed in business and develop and somehow be separate from these people and be different? I saw myself as different, but I was morphing into the same traits that look good on, in a boardroom meeting with similar people. Like it becomes like bad behavior becomes normalized, and it starts in the home. It starts whoever leads that family and that team, and that's the way it goes. And if they're interacting with the world that way, that's what happens. You know. So it's easy. I just watch, I watch so many things on, just catching up on what's going on with this whole fire, and what else is going on in the world. That's how I start my mornings, with some pretty deep dives, and like not just like looking for highlights of of the blame game. And that's what mainstream, and that's what media, and that's what most people will focus on, is kind of like just this blame game. And it doesn't work like that. Like there's no improvement if that's how it works. It's easy to do. It's it's a human nature thing to like point out what's wrong and all that stuff, which is fine, to do some kind of like analysis of a situation. Like that makes sense. But finding solutions, um, and in having a mindset that's not about, if something goes wrong, then I better make sure that I keep it away from me, so I don't have any of that blame or that failure on me. And that definitely starts in the home. Parents don't want to take the the ownership a lot of times, I've noticed, of some deep character defects that they instill in the children, and then gaslight that child for behaving the way that they taught. That's so common. It's crazy, but it's crazy. So, parents are some of the worst violators of this. They take no responsibility for the bad stuff that they inject into their children very often, but they absolutely are there for all the trophies and the accomplishments, and how that reflects on them. Um, I'm watching that play out right now in Los Angeles and on the media platforms. Just listening to individuals, whether they're professionals or they're independent people like me, um, you know, there's a lot of just, they did it, we're right, they're wrong. Like that isn't really, living in that is like, it's so small minded. That's a big part of our problem. We've got to be right. It's like, yeah, maybe, but like what, right about what? Being right at that moment to prove that something that's accurate, that someone miscalculated. Like, that's such a short-term approach, and it's so not collaborative. you know it's kind of like third grade in the sandbox playing with matchbox cars, and fighting over the Dukes of Hazzard car because it was in your spot or some shit like that. It's all this. It never changes, man. I mean, it's so childish to watch this, and with so much, you know, in my opinion, planned, absolutely premeditated disasters. Um, Cal Fire gets a bigger budget every time there's a big fire in California that they can't stop. So, like, everything is working against the hardworking person who actually pays their taxes, takes care of their family, tries to instill the right things in their kids the best they can. There's a few of them. There's not many, but there are a few. And I fight for those people. I stand up for those people, because this whole blame game thing is just, there's a big difference between identifying very poor behaviors in people and how they affect good people and just people in their surroundings that are negatively affected by them. Gavin Newsom, on a large scale, I mean, on the top scale of, the presidents and stuff, they're all, I'm not a guy who's going to dive too deep into the red and blue and which side's right and all that, because both sides are in cahoots. So at the top level. So, I'm not delusional, um, at all. So that's not what this is about. That's my point. That's set up on purpose by smarter people at the top that get the masses to be able to fight over red and blue, like we're football teams. Get it? Like, to not like each other, to cause fragmentation. So what's playing out here in California, I'm not in California now. I keep thinking I am sometimes. I left for reasons, man. And this is one of the big reasons. All that type of gaslighting, blaming, good people for things. Those days are over. And for people, I talk about it because it's a pandemic behavior that functions in the highest white collar technology and media companies in the world. It runs rampant. Blaming, gaslighting, passive aggressiveness, and one of the underlying root cause of all of that, selfishness and greed, and small men that are trying to be powerful once in their life by attaining things, money and assets, at all costs. So, just be careful what you want, because you'll end up like I did around a lot of people who are like that, and then all of a sudden, in my case, you either adapt and become more like those people, or you run for your fucking life and you figure out what the hell's wrong with you. And in my case, I had to figure out what was wrong with me. Why am I around all these really shallow, big degrees, but super shallow people who just completely stay focused on the superficial of acquisition of money, titles, and power. And it is a 24/7 job in the world I've lived. So, these guys like Gavin Newsom, they're just those guys. They bring no value at the end of the day. They bring fragmentation. They are able to extract massive amounts of money by power and coerciveness and slick talk, and being able to have the look, you know what I'm saying, and be convincing. They're the best sales people and actors in the world that play those roles, and they are extremely good at the things I'm talking about. I was too, but I was so confused because I'm just a small country kid. I'm a small town kid, man, and I grew up with working class parents who actually, in this area of our life, was really, really clear to me. It was a very consistent message of, work hard and bring value to the table, whatever you're doing, like really be an added value to the thing, and really help solve problems, like help figure things out. Um, I've carried that into my life, whether it was sports or business, or sometimes in my relationship, sometimes not. That's the hardest part. And that's my point, is Los Angeles is a macro view of the massive dysfunction in our nuclear families, in our communities. And it's just this massive ripple wave that ends up as a tsunami in Los Angeles. Um, my heart hurts for a lot of people this morning. It's been hurting for people because I know what it's like. It's not some far off thing. It's like, it's triggering, man. It's traumatic going through a fire like that. And to have people at the top, including the fire chiefs in Los Angeles, the arrogance and the lack of ability and gaslighting strong, competent, good people, those are the things that have been popular for the last 20 years, give or take, and I remember being down there in Silicon Valley during the Obama inauguration. Newsom was in office. Like, I was driving around a diesel truck in Silicon Valley, you guys, doing one of the biggest startups in the Valley. And I was a total outcast. And I just think it's interesting how times have changed. So, you know, I'm proud of the path that I've chosen. I'm glad I changed my friends and my, my people I work with. Not everybody. I miss some people I work with big time. Um, but there's some other folks, man, that I have brought into my teams in this last software startup, from that world, a lawyer in particular, who was so dishonest, so gaslighting, blaming, not bringing the things to the table that were promised, and taking a lot more of the company than absolutely deserved. Um, Totally dishonorable, but legally got the contract done. He's, so there's no, it reminds me of one of my old investors in one of the companies I worked for when I was young. We had investors like Bill Gates, man, and a lot of employees that had reported directly to Bill Gates. And these are just vile people, dude. And that's why Newsom's in office, because those people put Newsom in office and they kept his ass in office. Get it? So, yeah, this whole thing is going to be changing dramatically, because the amount of damage done now to the elite people in Los Angeles, now that they're upset and they're hurt, like we've been getting hammered up here in NorCal. They have power. They have money and power and prestige. They can get things done. We're just country folk up here. We didn't have the same kind of power. But now that Los Angeles is hurt, I promise you, California will change. That's how it goes, man. So I think, out of all the tragedy, that's a positive that will happen. That's not blaming. That's what's going to happen. So that's a cause and effect. Owning my mistakes, owning my strengths, my weaknesses, and really, and having someone from an outside perspective that I could trust and admire in how they live their life, totally different than the kind of guys I'm talking about, that they wake up wanting to help people. And that's something that I just really, in the right way, not just being, signing up to be a teacher or a social worker or something and saying that you're helping a bunch of people and then go home and be bitter and have a bunch of dysfunction because you've been subordinate all day long. That's what happens often, in all of us, but especially in that kind of world that I've been around since I was little. So, and I also participated in it as an adult, So you guys, my thing is, I hold myself to the highest standard. Like, these other people, they're doing their thing. I'm going to analyze it, because I'm going to constantly look at the things that I think are shady in somebody, trying to pass that off onto good people, whether they're blaming them, gaslighting them in kind of passive aggressive ways, which is usually how it goes. But it all starts, like I say, here. It's me identifying those traits that I used to think were just out there, like most people think, with some moral high ground that's not real. And, just being able to put those onto someone else. And it doesn't work like that. Trying to get sober and save your life. Like, that's when all of those things start to like fall away. And the truth becomes more apparent to self, then that helps seeing outside and what's honest and what feels not honest. And it's that kind of barometer, that kind of radar, I think is why I think and speak the way I do about this kind of stuff. So it's going to be a great day. I'm just feeling great, man. And I love sharing things that are that I have some experience in, that's actually something, that close to home with Gavin Newsom, and experiencing this whole thing multiple times in NorCal. It's just, I wanted to share that, you guys, because I think it's you know, it's a perspective that should be shared in the right way. You know what I mean? Like, not just throwing rocks and sticks at another problem. So you guys have a great day. I'm going to, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, you guys.